Okay, so only one absent. What I wanted to go over is just some of the PowerShell scripting that we expanded into on our afternoon class. We have a file called something. I originally intended to put that in my documents folder and not have it on my desktop. I like to keep the desktop clean. Windows actually kind of slows down the more icons you put on it. I'm going to move these PowerShells into my downloads folder, just to chunk them in there. And I'm going to move this script that we created. That way my desktop's nice and clean and Windows operates better with as few icons on the desktop as possible. You don't have to clean it up. It's just an annoyance I try to do. Just don't look at my laptop screen. It slowly collects icons, and I try to clean it up, and then you know, a year later I look at it, I was like, wait, try to keep this thing clean. Now I've got 60 icons on my desktop. So okay, so I'm going to go ahead and edit this something again. Just right click on your script that you saved, wherever you saved it, documents, desktop, and open with code. Seems to be running a little slower than what should be normal. Right, well, it runs slower on Monday too. Afternoon class was running kind of fast. I don't know. I guess this morning it's just not ready. It's not a morning VM. Something going on there. Guess I could double check my. It could all lead back to my DNS settings being off. And go check those real quick. I think that could possibly be the DNS. I mean, that's referring back to itself. That's okay. And the two DNS servers replicate with each other, so it shouldn't be a problem. But I'm gonna go ahead and put in the, instead of pointing to my local host, I'll point to my local host with another address, the real address. 127 is the real address, but that shouldn't have caused issues, but I'm going to go ahead and fix that. DNS is normally the issue of about 90% of the problems on machines. I'm going to check my server too while I'm at it. But it's probably not the issue of PowerShell. How much RAM am I consuming? Only 20 gig. You're laughing. Okay, that one was set correct. Close down server 2. Okay. Okay, so right in here we got we just ran a straight set of commands, just 2 commands, line by line, serial execution. I actually created a branch or a decision in the afternoon class after we did this because we had a little bit of extra time in that class. I'm going to go and just delete all of that and start from scratch. I'm going to do a clear the front of the screen. I'm showing you something kind of cool. If I just type clear and I don't specify anything else, clear is an alias, and it pops down here in the bottom that I have a problem. It's not a big problem. It's a warning. It's not a red stop like this is going to not work at all. It's saying that clear is an alias, and just for coding etiquette, you should try to avoid aliases for other people looking at your code and actually use the full word. But clear will work. And it's got like a little light bulb beside it, and you can replace it with what it says would be better coding etiquette if you want to. So that's kind of a neat thing with Visual Studio Code. It was highlighted when I hit enter. So clear host, the same thing as it's like clear in Linux, clear the screen. When you run your scripts, it just makes it look better if you clear before you run code. Okay, so we're going to do a branch. We're going to make a decision. We're going to test for something, and whether if it's true, we'll execute a piece of code. If it's false, we'll execute something else. And to do that in coding language, it's simply an if statement. Now, most coding languages have an if statement, and they're basically, if statements are good for checking for one thing. You can get if statements to check for more than one thing, but there's other coding techniques you can typically use for that. So you're just basically checking, do I have money? You don't have to check if you don't have money. All you have to do is check if you have money. You don't have to do a second check to see if you don't have any money. There's no point. If you check and you have money, there's no point in then going back and checking a second time to see if you don't have money, because you've already determined that. And I've had people try to check for two different things, and they only needed to check for one. So if you check for one, then the other would be implied. You can determine if the other is true or not. So if you check for money and you don't have any money, then, well, that lets you know you don't have any money. You don't have to then go and check if you don't have any money. That makes sense. So an if statement starts off with if. Real complicated. It has some parentheses. What's inside of the parentheses is what that you want to check. And it's followed with curly brackets. What? My favorite bracket. Favorite brackets. So I went ahead and hit enter. It auto formatted and tabbed over to make it look pretty. That's nice. If you've done Python in the past, Python uses coding etiquette to determine starting and stopping of things, but PowerShell doesn't care. It uses the bracket, it uses symbols to determine when things start and stop. But it is still nice to make things look elegant. So anything between the curly brackets will be ran if whatever's inside the parentheses is true. Then you normally have an else, because sometimes you want to run some code if the stuff in the curly bracket is not true. If it evaluates to false, then it would execute things between curly brackets after an else clause. So it would skip over the first set of curly brackets and execute something in the last curly brackets. So let's put some code in here. Just some, I'm gonna write host, and inside of parentheses, we're gonna put something. Let's put you're great. Foreground color. Green. Foreground color. Cyan. So we got some code. We could put like lots and lots and lots of lines of code between the curly brackets to run, but we're just going to print some stuff to the screen. And so now we have to have a test. If what? We got to test for something. We can't just run it blankly. We've got to put something in between the parentheses. So I could put a math evaluation in here. I could do if 1 is equal to 1, that would evaluate to true. I did not use equal marks. PowerShell does not use equal marks as a comparative operator. Some other coding languages uses equal marks as a coding comparative operator, but a lot of them will use it as an assignment operator. You'll get confused here when y'all are doing SQL. SQL uses double equal marks as a comparative operator, and a single equal as a putting something into a variable. There's some interesting differences between some coding languages. PowerShell uses abbreviation for equal, less than, greater than. So it's a series of letters. So if 1 is equal to 1, that'll evaluate to true. We'll get the stuff that's in the first curly brackets. The stuff in the second curly brackets will not be executed. It'd only be run if it was false. So if we do a control F5, we should get a message on our screen saying you're great. If I make it into a false statement, we just have to change one of the number ones up here to something other than 1. And then if I run it again, we lost. So that's what I went over in the first class. Not the first class, y'all are the first class. The second class, the afternoon class. Kind of cool. We will get into actually needing to use if statements and different things into the system. Okay, that's what I wanted to do with PowerShell for today anyway. I also want to give you some time to do some test out today, but we added a hard drive into server 3. So I was wanting to set up the hard drive that's in server 3. So on server 1, because server 3 only has command line junk, I could do it from the command line in PowerShell, but I don't really want to. I want to use Server Manager because it's there. And There's an old legacy way of dealing with hard disk called disk management that Microsoft has that allows you to click on a disk and you can partition it, you can create simple volumes, you can format it, you can deal with drives individually. That's the legacy way. There's some new features that Microsoft has out there. One of them is called data deduplication. It allows it to scan the drive for not individual files, but just scan the drive for blocks of zeros and ones that are identical and eliminate duplicates. That's not possible on the legacy partitioning scheme that they've got. So they've come out with a new system. It's a new set of monitoring software and a database and everything all mixed together to handle storage, not only storage plugged into the local machine, but storage that you can access across the network, that you can pull hundreds of drives together into enormous storage. I believe a 2019 server, I think it's up into the petabyte range that you can pull stuff together for storage. You're like, whoa, petabyte range. Yeah, well, I mean, there's companies out there, YouTube, 400 to 500 hours of video are uploaded every minute. So think of how much an hour of video size is, and just think that 400 to 500 hours every single minute is being uploaded. That's a lot of videos. That's a lot of people uploading videos. So yeah, there's need for immense storage. So traditional storage does not work anymore. They have to have basically an AI type setup where they can automate and just start throwing hard drives into this pool so that people throwing data centers have them, they can expand out fast enough. If you had to try to individually format drives and partition them out, it's no longer possible with the amount of data being generated to handle that. So Microsoft has created a new feature called storage space. There's Cloud has a very similar, VMware has a very similar thing to storage space. And my VMware class is getting into right now, or about to get into, but we'll look at the Microsoft's way of doing it. So with our servers, we have all the servers running. I wanted to check on something on server 3 before that we deploy out that second drive. Let's go ahead and right click and add roles and features and make sure that all of our roles and features are set that we need to have on server 3. As I next through this, I'm looking for the file services is installed. I'm looking for data deduplication, something called volume shadow copy service. There's several features that I want to have pre-installed. So as I go through here, make sure server 3 is highlighted. And on this role server selection, under file and storage services, I think we only installed one service via PowerShell. Let's go ahead and do a graphical install of File Server Resource Manager, File Server Volume Shadow Copy Service, Agent Service, VSS, Data Deduplication, Document and Print Services, So we've added 4 checkboxes. The file server is not checked. You would need to go ahead and check it. So file server checked, data deduplication is checked. Saves disk space by storing a single copy of identical data on the volume. File server resource manager helps you manage and understand files and folders on the server, schedule file maintenance tasks, storage reports, classifying of files and folders, figuring folder quotas. How much space can you put in a single folder? Defining file screening policies. You can block certain file types from being stored in certain folders with File Server Resource Manager. The volume shadow copy service here, the description on it, enables you to perform volume shadow copies of applications that store data on the file server. Well, that's very descriptive. Like, God, what does that mean? If a file is changed, it scans it on a schedule that you set. And anytime files are changed, it makes a backup cache copy of it. Even if you delete a file, it keeps the cache copies on part of the drive so that you can just tell it to check a previous version of a folder and find the cache copy of a file that's accidentally been deleted and removed from the recycle bin, and you can restore it. Saves a lot of time for a backup administrator. You don't have to go find it on backup media somewhere. And print and document services, well, it handles printing and scanning and stuff for clients. So let's install those roles. You don't need any features installed. It comes down, ask for what type of print server do you want. The regular print server is all you really need. The LPD service became obsolete around 1999 when the Unix operating system, Linux operating system, come out with CUPS, Common Unix Printing System. So anything past 1999 on the Unix side doesn't need LPD. So likely you're not going to need it anymore. That's for old Unix systems. Let me go back a little bit here. There was something in the list here. Services for NFS. That's a Unix share protocol. I've never had that be stable on a Windows machine. If I wanted to share something on the Unix protocol, I just set up a Linux machine and share it out. But I've not seen any version of Microsoft Server, even all the way back to NT 4.0, that service was stable enough to use in a production environment off of a Windows machine. I've always had to use it off of a Linux machine. Just my 2 cents and what I've run into. That service normally has to be restarted once a week or once every other week because it locks up. And when things can't access storage that they're supposed to be accessing, it causes lots and lots of trouble. Okay, that's all I wanted to talk about. I didn't make any changes to anything past those 4 checkboxes on the roles. Data deduplication, file resource manager, VSS, and print server, and click install. So I'm putting all of these services on server 3 because you don't want to do anything on the domain controllers. If one of those servers could be compromised and it was on the domain controller, then possibly the entire Active Directory services could also be compromised. So it's dangerous to try to do that. Any questions? In order to have like fireworks or something on the screen saying, congratulations, you finished installing. It's just so boring. It says feature installation succeeded. Click close once it's finished.
Did get a new option on the left-hand side. Print it.
So I do have a new option here on the left-hand side, print services. It only showed up because, well, server 3 is in my server manager list, detected that feature and is available on server 3 now. I don't remember print services is this semester or LAN 2. That's always nice and confusing. I think it's LAN 2, but it's installed anyway, just in case. So we're wanting to go under file and storage services. File and storage services lets us mess with local volumes and stuff, shared folders, remote storage across internet connected SCSI protocol. Let's click on storage pools. Storage pools is the new subsystem that Microsoft has introduced in 2012 server, I believe it was, to enable things like data deduplication and pooling a large number of physical disks that can be located inside or external from the computer. Pooling them almost like an internal RAID card. Primordial. You may have heard primordial in like biology class or science class where they talked about the beginnings of life on Earth. There's like just this amino acid pool of stuff that all of a sudden became life. They call it the primordial thing. So primordial is the building blocks of storage here. Right now, we only see one disk, but this here is really designed that you may have lots and lots of physical disks to pool together and configure it almost like an internal RAID card. So RAIDing stuff together, you link a bunch of disks into some type of RAID array, like the RAID 10, RAID 5, mirroring, just a bunch of disks set up, whatever type. You pull them into a big chunk of data, terabytes or petabytes in size. And then that huge chunk, you create something called a virtual disk off of that huge chunk. So you take sections, that huge pools of storage, and you designate sector 0 and you designate an ending sector and you present it as a hard disk. It's a virtual hard disk, but so the OS can, and the formatting tools, the file system knows how to access sector 0 to whatever the ending is. It's kind of a 3-step process. Same thing that if you went into the BIOS when you're booting up a big server that's got a RAID card in it and linking stuff together. Some of you gamers may have set up RAID 0 on a couple of drives, help speed up your gaming. It's kind of similar to that. So in this list, I'm going to need to create a storage pool. So task, new storage pool. Create a name to link hard disk under is basically what this is doing. Storage pool 01.
I was thinking kitty pool.
So I have been known to name it swimming pool before in class, but storage pool 01, SP01 sounds good. Next, select all of the available hard disks that you'd want to include into the pool. Check. We only have one. You got like a real big selection to choose from. Normally you'd probably check all of them, but we did. We checked them all. Okay, next. All of them being the one. Cool. Create. No checkbox to open another box, is there? Nope. Maybe towards the end of this, there'll be a checkbox. Be a checkbox. Yeah, so there's, I don't know why it didn't automatically check that. So we pulled our stuff together. Now we need to create a virtual disk on top of the pool. Creating the virtual disk is actually going to, I haven't done anything but say these are the disks that we're going to utilize. This next step, we're going to create a virtual disk and also specify if it's going to be RAID 5 or mirrored RAID or something like that. We've only got one disk, so there's just going to be a simple, we can't RAID anything. So I'm going to put the check. I'm going to click close. And it'll open up another dialog box. If you forgot that checkbox, you can just go under virtual disk task and create a new virtual disk. Not very hard. Okay, select the pool. I've only got one. Run through this wizard. What should we name it? DD01. I always think venereal disease with VD, but we'll just have to think virtual disk and not the other. Okay, we go next. Enclosure awareness. We don't have it actually in an enclosure, so next. Enclosure awareness, basically, if you've got an external NAS box, enclosure awareness will know if it's like platter disk or if they're SSD disk and what type of RAID that it is that's being backed. So that's talking with like an EMC NAS, very high-end commercial devices. Simple. Creating a simple volume. We don't have multiple disks to deal with, so we can't mirror, we can't set up striping. Those require more than one drive. So we have to select simple. Next, let's just use the whole thing, fixed size, sure. Use all of it. This is where you could, you know, if you added together like 50 terabytes or even a petabyte stuff, at this point is where you could create, well, no, this is not that point. You want to automatically allocate the whole chunk or grow as needed from the big pool. I normally like to do fixed sizes. This next screen is where you specify how much of that huge pool that we want to make on this virtual disk. So if we did have terabytes of information here, I'd probably make multiple virtual disks across the however many terabytes or petabytes of data that was at this point. But since we're doing this lab and we've only got 59 gig, we're going to use all of it. And just do maximum size button. And click next. And let's create. We just created a disk that's now being presented to the operating system as something it can deal with. And they do have a checkbox automatically. You want to format it? Basically what it says. So yes, when I hit close, it'll auto open up the next screen. And this is the third and last step, is to format the virtual disk. Go next, make sure server 3 is highlighted. Disk 2 should be the only thing there available to you. It's the only thing not formatted. We're going to use the entire capacity. We could partition the thing out if we wanted to, but I don't want to use all the space. It's continuing on, assign a drive letter or map it to a folder like, you know, Linux mapped extra drives into folders. They didn't have drive letters. So you can do that in Windows. But let's just E drive, sounds great. We've done that in past semesters, so we'll leave it at E. Go next. NTFS file system, we'll call it our data volume. That way when Star Trek characters come visit us, the volume to store data's brain into. Okay. Go next. Data deduplication, sweet. That appears because we installed the service. This here would not appear if we didn't install the service. We wouldn't have had a choice. And since we've added it in, let's go ahead and enable data deduplication at this point. General purpose file server, deduplicate files older than 3 days. Sounds good to me. You don't want to data duplicate anything too new because the file's probably maybe constantly changing. So you want to let it sit there for a few days unaltered before you want the server to start checking to see if we can eliminate duplicate space on it. You do have to set a schedule, otherwise it doesn't work. So click the set deduplication schedule and enable background optimization does not do anything unless a schedule is actually set. You have to set at least one. So I'm going to enable throughput optimization. Whenever you want to do it. You may only want to do it on the weekends. Make sure it's not during a time that you're backing up the system. So check the duration and stuff. I'd say we'll put it at 5 hours. Start time 1:45 a.m. Has everybody got that? 1:45 a.m. Sounds like a good time to start. We're not here. I don't know that you'll be remoting in messing with these things at 1:45 a.m. in the morning. Some of you might, but it shouldn't slow you down too much. We're not going to have tons of data to deduplicate on that anyway. But that's the thing. Make sure it's outside of business hours. It does best when nobody's making changes to files. So I'm going to hit OK. That's pretty much the complexity of setting up data deduplication. You have to set a schedule. That's the trick. Getting it work. You can't just leave it set on background optimization. It won't do anything. Okay, next. All our info. Yep, create. I'm going to refresh my screen. I guess I got to click the storage pool to see the virtual disk on it. Maybe it just had to wait long enough. I don't know. We've added a second drive. And that was the trick, using storage pools to enable data deduplication. The first time that I read about data deduplication, I did not read about storage pools about 10 years ago. So I tried to set it up. I installed it like any other server I've ever set up in the past. And I tried to go in and enable data deduplication on the drive, and it was grayed out. I didn't understand why. And then I got to reading that it had to be created through a storage pool for you to enable data deduplication. So I had to delete the drive and then recreate it under storage pools. So now if I click on volumes, I should see all of the volumes from all of my servers, C drives on the server 1 and 2, and then C and E drive on server 3. And scroll down, there's 0 data deduplication savings. Cool. Let's throw some data on there. And then I'll let you do some test out stuff, and we'll check on Friday. I don't know if Friday's, it'll probably be Monday before we'll have any data deduplication savings. Let's go ahead and create a shared folder that we can access and throw some data on there. So where would I go to create a shared folder? Well, there's a couple things. I could do shares here, I could go shares here. There's multiple places you can create a share. I like to go to the shares on the left side. Old way, used to use File Explorer. Create a new folder, give it a name, right click on it, go to properties, go to sharing tab, share it out, set permissions on it. The new way, use Server Manager. You got more features that you can add into it. You also have things like photos and other stuff you can add through the Server Manager that you can't the legacy way. It's best to use Server Manager for new shares or PowerShell. So I'm going to go share, new share under task. I typically always pick quick share and go next. The share location, pick the server. For this class, it should always be server 3. We're not going to share anything on server 1 or server 2. And I typically don't ever want to share anything off of the C drive. That's where the operating system's at. So I'm going to pick E. Just for best practice, I'm not sharing anything on the domain controller. I'm not sharing anything on a system drive. Cool. You have the option, if there's a folder already exists on E drive, to browse for it and select a pre-existing folder, or simply just clicking next and it'll auto create a folder structure. It'll auto create a E shares folder with a subfolder, whatever share name you want. So let's name this one, let's just create a public folder. That'll be the share name. And also on this page, it tells you how that you can access the share name from a computer, like a Windows machine, Linux machine, or whatever. It's // server 3 / public is the access path to it. Cool. The physical location, it tells you it's on E drive. So if you had to go physically find it on a hard drive somewhere, that's where you would find it on File Explorer on server 3.
Are those paths case sensitive?
No. Microsoft uppercases everything when it reads it. So it's not case sensitive. Okay, so I'll go next. The custom configuration here is something that you can't get by the just legacy sharing it out. One of the more important sections here is encrypting data access. I typically don't like caching of shares unless it's one person accessing the share. I'll normally uncheck that. Or if it's a share that nobody has access to except for reading data, you could allow caching. But I almost always uncheck allow caching. And then I check encrypts data access. The access-based enumeration at the top simply hides files if a person doesn't have permission to the file. Normally not that useful for most situations. If you're giving somebody access to a folder, they likely need to see all the files in that folder. There'd be a few instances where there'd be certain files they didn't have access to, but that'd be a weird situation and probably kind of rare to need that top checkbox. So I normally always just check that bottom one. The bottom one could cause you problems with like copy machines. If somebody's scanning documents on the copy machine and it's uploading it to your server, copy machine may not have encryption capability. You may have to have that unchecked. Windows 7 clients don't have encryption capability. So you need to upgrade to Windows 10 or not have that checked if you have Windows 7. Windows 8 does, but not Windows 7.
You don't have to have any of these checked.
No. But security these days, and depending on the business and stuff you're dealing with, most of them are required that data is encrypted while it's in motion and while it's at rest. So this checkbox covers the data in motion being encrypted. Most websites you go to now are HTTPS. So the data in motion coming to your browser is encrypted. It prevents viruses and malicious code of flaws being injected into the system, because if it doesn't decrypt correctly, then somebody's tried to tamper it with it, or it's become corrupt over the wire. So encryption really helps out on that. And all the people, all the businesses we deal with, they're having to encrypt data in motion. So that helps solve one of those problems, at least with Microsoft shares. So I'm going to go next. Permissions. I'm going to go ahead and customize permissions. And I'm going to start with the Share tab. The permissions that you always set 99.9% of the time on this tab. And you probably just basically take a picture after this is done and go, that's the answer always. In this class, it'll always be the answer. That 0.01% of the time might be some weird business case scenario somewhere that you have to set, but you always set everyone to change. And you always add in the local administrator's account on the computer that you're sharing it on, so server 3. So I have to click select the principal name. I have to change my location to the machine that I'm sharing it from. Define the local administrator's account. Click OK, and then type in administrators. It has to have the S on the end of it. And it does have to be, since it's not coming from the domain, it does have to be spelled out correctly before the check name will resolve the path. And I'll click OK. Click full control, and I'll click OK. And basically take a picture of that. That's the answer of any time you share something else.
So we have to, the object name, we have to type out server 3.condoso.
You just type administrators and then hit check name.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Ah, gotcha.
So that's always the answer. The change rights allows people, not administrators, to basically do everything to the file, create files, delete files, edit files. They cannot change permissions on the file though. Kind of weird, they have change rights. That means they got change rights on the file, but they don't have the ability to manage permissions.
So we do full control on the administrator.
Correct. The administrators have full control because they are the ones that have the burden of protecting everything is on their shoulders. So the administrators must have access to change permissions and set them. So everyone that changed gives something called mandatory access control. Administrators having full control gives them discretionary access control, meaning it's at the administrator's discretion on what people get access to the file, and everyone else just has to accept it. So that's why you always set them at that. It's kind of like a parking lot. We'll talk more about share permissions and stuff at a later time, but that's always the answer in this class anyway. I'm going to go over here to permissions. And as far as right now, I want to go ahead and let people put stuff up there. and delete their own files, and that's what Microsoft Auto has set. They can't delete anybody else's file. They got a little special permission here. It's unique. It lets people create a file, and they can change their file, and they can delete their file, but they can't delete somebody else's file. Pretty cool. So automatically, yeah, I'm not going to make any changes here. I'm just going to hit OK. And next, and create. We'll cover permissions, more detail later on. I just want to create a bunch of files and set y'all free to work with test out. So a couple ways I could get to public. I don't know if I want to show you the easy way or the hard way first. You got to change your location, Robert. There's a location button. Yeah, and click server 3. No, it's up top. Scroll up. All the way up. One more. There you go. Now you can click check name, and it should. Yes, that's good. Click full control, and you're ready to finish. Yep, just hit OK and finish out. I could open File Explorer and type whack server 3. Or you can cheat like Wade and right click on it. Now if I do server 3, there's my public folder shared. I could access it. I could right click on it and open share. It probably put Katoso at the end of it. So whack server 3, katoso.com. The katoso.com is optional. It's in a single domain environment typically. So however you want to access it, whack server 3 and then double click the folder or right click, open share. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to create a new file in here. Right click. This is fun. People love doing this. I'm going to try to get about 1 gigabyte of data in this system. We're going to type out 1 gigabyte of text. Are you ready? Big file. So big file's been created. Now I'm simply going to double click the big file. Open it with Notepad. Why it's asking me to, yeah, always open with Notepad. Text file. Okay. How long did it take to type out 1 gig of data? You had to put it on the keyboard, like Bart Simpson writing on the chalkboard. So I'm gonna select that and copy it. It's gonna, I guess, I don't know. I'm just gonna hit enter, and then I'm gonna see if I can copy the Control A, Control C. Maybe that will get the enter in there. Control V. Yeah, I did Control V, and if I just hold it down, it will run across the screen for a little while. Of course, that's going to take a long time, so I'm going to stop. So I've got a lot of lines there. I'm going to Control A it again. Control A selects everything. And then I'm going to copy it again. Control C. Well, that's neat. Now if I do Control V and I hold it down for however long I'm talking right now, and then wait a little bit longer, and then I let up on it and I save it. I'm going to see how big that file is. Yes. So I'm wanting the file to grow to about 100 meg. So Jacob's always trying to jump ahead and be fast and better than anybody, and he overloaded his system. So I'm not trying to, I'm trying to get the file to about 100 meg, and then I'm going to copy the file about 10 times. So I've got 3 meg right now. So I'm going to do a Control A and a Control C. And then I'm going to hit Control V about 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. And that should jump it to about 30 gigabytes. So that's 30 gig. So now I'm a little bit, I can calculate getting to 100 a little bit easier. I can do a Control A and I can do a Control C. And then there's, if I do Control V, since it's highlighted, it's just going to paste over it. So there's 30 gig, 60 gig, 90 gig, 90 meg, not gig, 90 meg file. That's probably, oh, I'm going to go over 100. Control V, that'll be a probably 120 meg file, something like that. And I'm going to save it. And I'm going to close down the window. So I'm wanting somewhere between 100 or a little bit over 100. So 140 is okay. Try not to go over 150. Somewhere between 100 and 150 on the file size. And then I'm simply going to copy the file and I'm going to paste it. You know, that's little about a half a gig. I'm going to go to copy 9 on that. And I have a 1.2 gigabytes consumed. So I've reached my roughly a little bit over gig that I wanted to put into the folder. That will give the data deduplication something to work on. With all the files having the same sentence in them, it should be able to do some pretty good data deduplication on that. That's what my goal was for server 3. Assume about a gig, and then probably Monday is whenever that we can actually see something happen, because it needs 3 days of the data sitting there and nothing happening to it before it'll start analyzing it. So over the weekend, it will deduplicate. See, Jacob's got restarted and calmed down. You want big files? You figured out Windows has a limit. Notepad does anyway.
I don't know what that one is. I know it.
Notepad was, I guess you probably filled up the RAM with Notepad. Seems like a flaw. Windows shouldn't allow Notepad to blue screen the system. I created a web link. You can open up in Google Chrome. It'll blue screen your computer. Okay, so that's all it's going to do. I'm just going, you can work on test out. If you want to see that link that crashes Windows, I think I'll put it over here in this one. It's my LAN 2 machine.